Your Honor, he disappeared for years. And now he wants to take them away? Christine's quivering voice broke through the courtroom, stifling every murmur in the room. Cameras snapped. Reporters crept forward. And there, under the judge's icy gaze, sat Kody Brown, the once untouchable father of sister wives, now a desperate father clinging to custody of children who barely knew him anymore. But this wasn't merely a custody trial, it was an reckoning. Years of shattered promises, lost birthdays, broken trust, and ugly betrayals had all culminated in this moment. A courtroom battle that would determine not only who the children would live with, but whether they'd ever be able to forgive the man who'd left them. And as stunning testimonies, hidden evidence, and heartbreaking testimony from the children themselves unraveled, one thing was certain: this trial was not about gaining custody. It was about revealing the truth that Kody had worked so hard to keep concealed. Your Honor, he left them for years. And now he wants to take them away? Christine's voice broke throughout the courtroom, quieting everyone within. It was the sort of moment you felt in your bones: tension, heartbreak, incredulity. Cameras clicked as photographers slouched forward in their chairs, eager for every last detail of this volatile case about to be revealed. And at the center of it all, stiffly seated and stone-faced at the defendant's table, was Kody Brown, once the charming, confident patriarch of sister wives, now another man in a courtroom battling for something he may already have lost. He glared over the aisle at Christine, the woman once by his side for decades of shared life, and now his most vehement adversary in a struggle that had turned intensely personal. This was not simply about custody. It was about pride, power, control, and the ruins of a family empire collapsing before the public's eyes. Christine's accusation stung because it was not only dramatic, it was real. Behind the scenes, for all those years, Kody had been moving farther and farther away from Christine and their children. The man who had taught that family togetherness and fatherhood were central to being a godly man had in many ways become a ghost in his own home. Birthdays went uncelebrated with empty seats. School events passed, and none saw him in attendance. Doctors' appointments were not kept. Telephone calls were brief, infrequent, and uncomfortable. The children who had been eager to see their father gradually ceased to anticipate his arrival altogether. And now, after all that time away, after years of selecting another wife, another home, another life, Kody was petitioning the court to give the same children over to him. It was the ultimate betrayal, it seemed to Christine. This wasn't the first heartache she had suffered at the hands of Kody. She had resigned herself, initially, to the fact that in a plural marriage there would be compromise. She had shared him with 3 other women. She had stood behind his choices, even when they stung. But what she could not forgive was the manner in which he had gradually disappeared from their children's lives, piece by piece, leaving him barely a memory. And now, standing in court as she heard his lawyer decry her as alienating and emotionally manipulative, she couldn't help but feel as though she was trapped in some bizarre parallel universe. How did a man who hadn't really been there suddenly become the victim? How could one who had left his children weeping at the window for his return now posit that he was the one struggling on their behalf for what was best? The courtroom itself was electric with expectation. Benches were filled with rows of spectators, legal experts, family law specialists, voyeuristic show fans who had watched every turn and twist in the Brown family drama. Even after all the years in the public eye, nobody had anticipated this. A polygamous family ripped asunder by jealousy and resentment was bad enough. A public custody hearing was something else again. And yet there they were, facing each other across the same room, flanked by attorneys and legalese, prepared to replay the entire history of their relationship before a judge and the voyeuristic public. Christine's attorneys began the case by presenting a heart-wrenching timeline. They drew the portrait of a man who, though biologically there, had been there emotionally for years. They described missed visits, forgotten holidays, ignored messages. They displayed pictures of holiday gatherings at which Kody's chair was eerily vacant. They displayed text exchanges in which the children texted their father, then were met with silence. Piece by piece, they built the story of abandonment, not the kind that happens all at once, but the kind that erodes trust slowly, until one day there's nothing left. But Kody's side had a very different version of events. His lawyer appeared in court and portrayed Christine as a bitter woman who had made up her mind that if she could not have Kody's love, then she would sabotage his relationship with his children. They alleged she had moved the children far from him intentionally, disregarded his efforts to renew their relationship, and poisoned their minds against their dad. This case is not about a man who doesn't care, his attorney asserted. It's about a mother who refuses to share. It was a cruel charge, one that Christine hotly denied, but it touched on the essence of the battle. Two individuals presenting entirely opposite accounts of the same family. As she heard the arguments, she remembered the early times, prior to the cameras, prior to the drama, prior to when everything collapsed. Then Kody had been another person. He had been engaged, excited, always ready to impart something new to the kids or organize family outings. She recalled late nights discussing their visions for the children's future, college, journeys, cultural traditions. Somewhere along the way, those dreams had fallen by the wayside, giving way to resentment, control, and competition. The man across from her now was a stranger, and the gap between them seemed too wide to ever cross again. The judge sat silently, her expression a mask. Family court isn't about who hurt whom, or who loved more, or even who was right. It's about the kids, their safety, their well-being, their best interests. And as both sides made their arguments, it became obvious that this trial was going to compel some uncomfortable questions. Did a biological father necessarily deserve custody, even if he wasn't around? Did a mother's unwavering devotion outweigh a father's later attempts to reconnect? And what did best interests truly translate into in a case like this, where love was all knotted up with resentment, and the past was always impossible to shake? The angst between Kody and Christine was palpable. They wouldn't even look at each other at times. Sometimes their eyes would cross for an instant, and the burden of decades spent together, the pleasure, the pain, the sorrow, would flash silently back and forth between them. But neither could allow nostalgia to take over. Too much was riding on it. This wasn't about them any longer. It was about their kids, their future, and their legacy. As the opening day of the trial drew to a close, journalists flooded the steps of the courthouse. Christine made a few quick remarks, her voice firm but thick with emotion. "I'm fighting for what's best for my kids," she explained. "That's all I care about." Kody, on the other hand, refused to comment, slipping into a black SUV, where Robin sat beside him. But insiders familiar with him said he was angry. Angry that Christine had portrayed him as the villain, angry that the media was appearing to side with her, and angry that the court may not decide in his favor. But above all the anger and courtroom posturing, there was something unmistakably tragic to the whole process. This was a family that had once preached love, unity, and faith, now boiled down to dueling attorneys and custody petitions. The man who had once testified that he could love and care for numerous wives and dozens of children now was trying to persuade a judge that he could care for even a handful, and the woman who had once committed her life to that dream was now fighting to keep her children safe from it. The courtroom war had only just started, but one thing was already sure: whatever the result, nothing would ever be the same again. The Brown family's history, once a story of unorthodox love and coupledom, had turned into a cautionary tale of betrayal, absence, and the heartaches attendant on decisions made years earlier. And when Christine emerged from the courthouse that night, she knew this was only the start of the battle of her life. The second day of the custody hearing broke with a chill of tension that lingered in the air before courthouse doors even opened. Reporters were already queued up along the stairs, microphones at the ready to chronicle the next page of a saga that had burst the boundaries of a family feud. Sister Wives fans stood outside, bearing signs. Christine was supported by some, Kody by others, as if this was a public referendum on everything the Brown family ever represented. Inside it was tense, filled with anticipation and fear. Everyone understood that today was the day the battle would actually start, the day both parties would unsheath their legal rapier and fight it out. Christine was the first to arrive, striding quickly through the cameras accompanied by her lawyer. Her expression was serene, but in her eyes was the tempest brewing beneath. She had lain awake all night reliving every detail of the day before. Kody's icy glare, his lawyer's attacks, the burden of her own witness statement. and she knew the worst was yet to come. Today the defense would launch its rebuttal. Today Kody's lawyers would attempt to dismantle her credibility piece by piece, and change the story she had been piecing together for months. Within minutes, Kody arrived, escorted by Robin and his attorneys, a look of confidence and resentment on his face. To his supporters, he seemed like a father prepared to battle for his children. To his detractors, he seemed like a man who was grasping to regain authority he had long since lost. When the gavel dropped, the courtroom was silent. Kody's lawyer stood up first, walking back and forth, as he started his day's opening argument. "This case is not about abandonment," he stated, his tone firm and commanding. "It is not about neglect. It is about a mother who has deliberately and systematically inserted herself between a father and his children." He blamed Christine for weaponizing her own pain and rewriting history to make Kody the villain. He referred to her out-of-state move as a strategic decision aimed at keeping the children away from the father, stating that all she did, from moving away to making public comments, was calculated to remove Kody from their lives. He even played some of the interview recordings Christine had done after the divorce, pointing out times when she had called Kody distant or uninvolved. Those comments, the lawyer contended, were not venting. They were one calculated attempt to shape the children's view of their father. Christine sat stone-faced, jaw clenched, trying not to respond. She knew this was coming. Kody's crew had long anticipated painting her as the villain, the irate ex-wife out for revenge. But knowing it and hearing it within a courtroom were two distinct things. Yet she kept her cool, not wanting to let them have the pleasure of watching her blink. When it was her time, her attorney stood up calmly and proceeded to the bench. "The defense would lead you to believe this is all about bitterness," he declared. "But this is reality. And reality is, Kody Brown was not here, not because Christine wanted him to be not here, but because he preferred not to be here." He cited phone records of months without calls from Kody, text messages from the children that went unanswered, and travel records that indicated Kody spent weeks at a time with only Robin's family while avoiding his others. "This is not alienation," he maintained. "This is abandonment, plain and simple." The courtroom murmured as proof after proof was laid out. Photographs of school activities without Kody, calendars of lost visits, testimony from friends and neighbors who had seen Christine raise the children all but alone. Every piece of testimony was a little stinging reminder of a reality that Kody was attempting to disown. And yet, Kody's attorneys shot back with their own story. They produced emails and messages in which Kody had requested to visit, only to be informed that the timing wasn't convenient. They offered up Facebook posts by Christine traveling or entertaining that, they said, disrupted visitation schedules. They even summoned a family therapist, who affirmed that Christine had expressed resentment towards Kody years before the divorce, and by doing so suggested that this battle for custody was not about caring for the children but about bitterness towards their father. With the war in court heating up, the emotional heat in the room started to increase. Christine's oldest daughter, Aspen, was called as a witness for her mother. She spoke confidently but softly, explaining that she had seen her younger siblings struggle with Kody's absence. "They used to wait by the window for him," she explained. "They'd dress up when they knew he was going to come visit, but most of the time he didn't show up. And when he finally did, he acted like he didn't want to be there." Her testimony was poignant, a first-hand account of the emotional damage Kody's decisions had inflicted. But when Kody's attorneys questioned her on cross-examination, they asked if she were prejudiced, if her allegiance to her mother had predisposed her. "Would you say that you and your father have ever disagreed in the past?" one lawyer asked bluntly. "Would you say that those disagreements could influence how you view his relationship with your siblings?" It was a deft try to undermine her, but the damage had already been done to Kody's reputation. Up next was one of Kody's best friends, brought in by the defense as character witness. He portrayed Kody as a loving, committed father who was heartbroken over his estrangement from the children. "He speaks of them constantly," said the friend. "He wants to be there. He wants to repair things. He's not the man that Christine is portraying him to be." But during cross-examination, Christine's attorney posed a stark, heartbreaking question. "How many times have you observed Kody with those children in the past 2 years?" The witness paused. "I haven't myself," he acknowledged. The courtroom hummed. The man testifying to Kody being a father hadn't even seen him act like a father. The battle lines had been drawn more sharply than ever before. On one side was Christine's description of a man who had opted for distance and now wanted control. On the other side was Kody's account of a mother who had manipulated things to suit her needs. Both sides produced evidence. Both sides had witnesses. Both sides had presented narratives that in their own respects seemed plausible. And yet, the difference between the two narratives was staggering. So great that they seemed to be describing two completely different worlds. The judge would have to sift through all that contradictory evidence for one of the most difficult aspects of the case. Outside the courtroom, the public was equally polarized. Social media was on fire with discussion. Some viewers sided with Christine, felt that she had every right to defend her children from a father who had abandoned them. Others felt that Kody was being unjustly demonized, that a father's love didn't deserve to be written off due to past errors. Hashtags #TeamChristine and #Justice for Kody trended for days, and each new surprise from the trial made headlines. Behind the doors, however, all of that commotion didn't matter. What did matter were the children, their health, their stability, their future. And on the second day of the trial, which was coming to a close, that future seemed more tenuous than ever. Christine's lawyer encapsulated their case with understated assurance. Our client is not seeking to punish Mr. Brown. She is seeking to insulate her children from additional disappointment, additional abandonment, and additional heartbreak. Lawyer Kody's retort came quickly. Our client is not attempting to control anyone. He is attempting to re-establish his rightful role in his children's lives. Neither side was able to claim a win as the judge recessed for the day. Each had landed punches. Each had revealed vulnerabilities. The actual decision, the one that would define the remainder of their children's lives, was far from being finalized. Christine emerged from the courthouse tired but determined. Kody arrived minutes later, his jaw set, his eyes burning with anger. The battle lines were not simply drawn. They were gouged deep into the earth now. There was no going to be easy compromise. No quiet resolution. This was a war, and neither side intended to back down. And while the courtroom doors closed for the evening, the storm inside was only getting stronger. Each passing day would bring new revelations, deeper wounds and higher stakes. And by the time it was done, regardless of who won, the Brown family would never be the same again. The third day of the custody trial was tougher than the two that preceded it. The courthouse was full again, but today the crowd was more subdued, more reverent, as if they knew something important was soon to occur. Christine Brown was called to testify, and everyone realized that her testimony could determine the whole course of the case. This was her opportunity to address the judge directly, to bear all the years of pain and disillusionment that had brought her here. And it was also her biggest risk. One misstep, an errant word, an outburst of temper, a break in her demeanor, would provide Kody's lawyers with the fodder they required to reverse the momentum in his favor. As she stood before the courthouse that morning, Christine drew in a long breath and prepared herself. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't even about Kody. This was about her children, their security, their well-being, their happiness. And she was willing to battle for them with every ounce of strength she possessed. When the judge signaled her to come forward, the courtroom seemed to pause. Christine's steps were slow, deliberate, each echo resonating across the shiny floor. She was sworn in, sat and faced the attorney's table, where Kody sat, looking at her with an intensity that made the space around her feel thicker. The interrogation started slowly. Background information, timelines, general information, but soon Christine was pressed to discuss the crux of the case. Kody's interactions with their kids. And when she spoke of it, the courtroom shifted. Her voice, steady to begin with, had a rawness to it that quieted even the reporter's pencils. I begged him to be there, she whispered. I pleaded with him to appear, for birthdays, school concerts, doctor's visits, and most of the time he didn't. She took a breath, her hands shaking a little. The times he did, it was like he was doing me a favor, like he was just checking a box. Christine created a vivid image of what life was like in the years prior to their split. She talked of late nights spent waiting by the window for headlights that never appeared. She talked of birthdays spent with promises wrapped in silky language, only to have them callously reneged upon at the last possible moment. They'd ask me, "Is Dad coming?" she replied, her voice breaking. And I'd say, I don't know. Maybe, but inside, I knew he most likely wouldn't. The courtroom fell silent. Even the skeptics who had arrived with their reservations about Christine's intentions couldn't help but lean forward, swept up in the tragedy of her words. She didn't spin things, either. Christine acknowledged that she and Kody had argued, bitterly at times, about parenting choices and family priorities. But she swore that those disagreements had never been about alienating the children against him. I never instructed them to hate their father, she asserted. I never instructed them not to love him. In fact, I urged them to call, to write, to reach out. I told them, your dad loves you. He's just busy. I made excuses for him because I didn't want them to hurt. But the older he got, the more difficult it became to continue lying to him. She took another wobbly breath. Eventually, they quit asking if he would arrive. And that was the worst part, because that meant they quit hoping. Christine's attorney presented proof to validate her allegations: screenshots of ignored messages, phone records of months of no contact, and even canceled visits with Kody through emails that went from "I'm too busy" to "I'm not up to it." One especially painful shred of evidence was a handwritten letter from one of the children when they were merely 8 years old. Dear Dad, I miss you. I hope you can attend my birthday. Please attend, love name. He hadn't attended. I discovered that letter in a box when we were moving, Christine stated, her voice cracking. He never even read it. Then came one of the most poignant moments of the trial. Christine described the day she informed the children she and Kody were divorcing. They didn't cry, she said. They weren't even shocked. One of them just asked, "Does that mean he's not coming at all now?" And that shattered me. The courtroom fell silent except for the quiet sound of Christine sniffling as she struggled to regain control of herself. Even Kody shifted restlessly in his seat, his jaw clenching as if he were fighting with feelings he didn't want to express. Robin leaned over to put a comforting hand on his arm, but he did not glance at her. He simply sat in front of her, expressionless. The cross-examination was merciless. Kody's lawyer had no hesitation in attempting to deflate Christine's credibility. He reproached her for overstating the degree of Kody's absence, for presenting him in the worst possible light on purpose. Would you say that you were angry when Kody chose to spend more time with Robin's kids? He probed. Yes, of course I was, Christine acknowledged. I was mad because my kids were being neglected. The lawyer continued to press. And isn't it a fact that you once complained to a friend that you would never forgive Kody? I said that yes, Christine admitted. But forgiveness and custody are two different animals. This has nothing to do with forgiveness. This has everything to do with what's best for my children. The attorney attempted another tack, asserting that Christine had encouraged distance by relocating from Flagstaff and making visits more difficult. Christine did not dispute that the relocation had caused hardships. I moved because I needed stability. I needed support. And I needed to provide my children with a home where they did not feel abandoned, she said. Kody knew where we were. He had every chance to visit. He didn't. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. Or maybe he was not invited. Christine's reply was swift and tart. If my children could invite him in after all the letdown, then he could have managed to come. Throughout the questioning, Christine kept her cool, never losing her temper or raising her voice. Her words were calculated, reflective, and profoundly human. She didn't paint herself as an ideal parent. She confessed her errors, conceded her deficiencies. But she testified with an authenticity that was impossible to discount. When she left the witness stand, the emotional force of her testimony loomed heavily over the courtroom. Even some of Kody's allies appeared rattled, muttering among themselves as Christine sat down. Kody's response was revealing. He never looked in Christine's direction once throughout her testimony. He didn't shake his head or roll his eyes as he had been known to do when things didn't turn out the way he wanted them to. He simply sat there, his fists knotted together, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on some place far off on the wall. Whatever it was that drove her, anger, guilt, or something altogether different, nobody really knew for sure. But for the first time, there was a glimmer of vulnerability past the bluster. In the news cycle outside the courthouse, Christine's testimony ran the show. Headlines blared, "Christine breaks down on stand." emotional plea for her children. The day Kody faced his past, legal experts argued over whether her testimony would affect the case, with some speculating that her candor and emotional richness had made her a much harder sell. Judges don't just see evidence, said one analyst during a news panel. They see credibility, consistency, sincerity. Christine demonstrated all three today. And as for Christine, she walked out of the courthouse drained but lighter. For the first time in a very long time, she felt like her truth had been heard, not distorted, not discounted, not crowded out by Kody's charm or manipulation. It didn't take away the hurt. It didn't reverse the years of disillusionment, but it counted. And it just might make all the difference when the judge made her ruling. That night, she tucked her children into bed with a little more hope than she had the night before. Hope that the court would see what she had seen all along. That being a parent isn't about biology, or control, or winning a fight. It's about showing up. And regardless of how this case turned out, she knew one thing for sure. She would never cease to appear for them. The fourth day of the trial was different from the time the doors opened. The mood had changed. The first 3 days had been mostly characterized by Christine's voice, her hurt, her sorrow, her reality. But it was now time for Kody. His attorneys had rehearsed him overnight for the big moment, teaching him how to stand up for himself, not as a monster Christine had made him out to be, but as a devoted father who'd been unjustly cast from his children's lives. He knew the risks were astronomical. If Christine's own testimony had turned the chord of sympathy towards her, this was his one opportunity to reclaim the storyline and show that he was not the neglectful, absentee father she had colored him as. As he entered the courtroom, neatly dressed in a navy suit tailored immaculately, and accompanied by his attorneys, there was a subtle shift in his attitude. He was not sulky or combative. He seemed intense, resolute, near belligerent. This was not a man poised to give up. This was a man poised to battle. When Kody was summoned to the stand, the room fell silent at once. Despite all the years that the Brown family had been in the spotlight, Kody had always been the overpowering voice, the patriarch, the authority, the one whose words tended to be the last to fall. But in the courtroom, that differential power didn't exist. Here he was merely another parent on the stand, and every utterance would be analyzed, questioned, and possibly turned against him. His lawyer opened with gentle fleshing out questions about his relationship to the children, the memories of their births, the best moments. Kody leaned into those memories, portraying himself as a man who had always cared for and cherished his family. "I was at every birth," he stated, his voice unshaken and steadfast. "I changed diapers. I slept all night when they were ill. I read them goodnight stories. I did everything a father is supposed to do." He painted a picture of family camping trips, Sunday dinners, late-night conversations with his teenage children about their futures. It was a picture of warmth and engagement, a contrast to the picture Christine had painted. But then the interrogation turned to the tougher questions. The years Christine had accused him of being absent. Kody did not dispute that there had been distance. Rather, he turned the story around. "The distance didn't occur because I stopped caring for them," he replied, his voice closing with anger. "It occurred because Christine began shutting me out. She relocated them without discussing it at all. She refused my calls. She informed me that I wasn't welcome in their house. What was I to do? Go where I wasn't wanted?" He accused Christine of deliberately alienating the children, saying that she had poisoned them against him and manipulated them into believing he didn't care. "I would call, and they wouldn't pick up," he continued. "I'd send gifts that were returned. I'd try to make plans, and suddenly they were too busy." Christine controlled everything. She controlled access, she controlled information, and she controlled how they saw me. His attorney introduced a chain of emails and texts to support his assertions. Texts in which Kody inquired about school activities but never heard back. Texts in which he offered to come but was told the timing wasn't right. There were even screenshots of Christine making snide comments regarding him in family group chats, something that Kody's representative said worked to create the children's negative impression of their father. "I did not leave my children," Kody insisted. "I was pushed away." The courtroom was split down the middle. Some in attendance felt sympathy for him, Perhaps there was merit to the suggestion that Christine had made things more difficult than they had to be. Others saw it as just another attempt to pivot and shift blame and rewrite history. But Kody wasn't done. He spoke passionately of his right to have a place in his children's lives. "I'm their father," he said, his tone growing louder with emotion. "That doesn't just cease because the marriage does. That doesn't cease because we don't get along. They're my kids too. I love them and I have a right to be their dad." He slammed his hand on the witness stand at one point, his voice ringing throughout the courtroom. "I have a right to be in their lives." The judge at once cautioned him to keep his temper in check. But the moment was significant. It revealed how much this fight had irritated him underneath. How much of himself he had invested in being the patriarch, the authority figure, the one in charge. Christine's attorney didn't hesitate, jumping on the contradictions when he cross-examined. "Mr. Brown," he started softly, "you say you were pushed out, yet isn't it true you went weeks, occasionally months, without seeing your kids?" Kody paused. There were moments communication was hard. "Yeah, hard," the lawyer echoed. "Or non-existent." Kody grew indignant. "I tried. I was struggling a lot. Struggling with Robin's kids," the lawyer replied, nodding toward the common criticism that Kody had put Robin's home first among the others. Kody clamped his jaw. "I was struggling a lot," he replied, now more briskly. The lawyer drilled on. "Did you testify that you were present for each significant moment in their lives? Did you attend their last 3 birthdays?" Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "No." "Their school graduation?" "No." "Their doctor's appointments?" "No." With each no, it struck like a hammer blow. The aggressive, enthusiastic father of the morning now seemed cornered and on the defensive. The attorney then moved on to one of Kody's most contentious choices: not going to some family gatherings if Christine was invited. "You said you were being excluded. But isn't it the case that you wouldn't go to your daughter's dance recital because Christine would be there?" Kody sighed. "It was complicated." "Complicated," the attorney echoed. "Or inconvenient," the courtroom murmured. The image of the loving, dedicated father was beginning to crack. Christine sat silently, her expression unreadable, while Kody attempted to justify his choices. "I didn't want to make a scene," he said. "I didn't want to confuse the children." But the harm had already been inflicted. His apologies fell flat when contrasted with the anguish Christine had portrayed in her testimony. Nevertheless, there were times when Kody's vulnerability broke through. When he was questioned regarding his connection with his youngest daughter, he softened. "I miss her," he confessed. "I miss all of them. I miss the fact that they would run to the door when I walked in. I miss Sunday pancakes. Undefined. I miss hearing about their days. Undefined. I just want to be their dad again." It was an uncommon peek at genuineness, one that even Christine appeared moved by. But opposing counsel was quick to remind the court that love and responsibility are 2 different things. "Undefined. Loving them is not enough," the lawyer said. "Undefined. They needed you to show up. Undefined. And you didn't." As Kody left the witness stand, the courtroom was abuzz with mixed feelings. His testimony had been fervent and forceful, yet inconsistent and in parts self-serving. Allies perceived a father struggling hard to remain present in his kids' lives. Detractors perceived a man unwilling to bear responsibility for the repercussions of his own actions. Even the judge's face was difficult to decipher, a blend of concern, doubt, and reflection. Outside, there was an immediate media storm. Headlines varied from Kody's explosive testimony, "I was pushed out," undefined, to Christine's lawyer dismantles Kody's defense. Talk shows and podcasts picked apart each word, each expression, each contradiction. Social media was a war zone, with fans and detractors debating who had painted the true picture. But one thing was certain: the custody battle was no longer about courtroom arguments. It had morphed into a credibility contest, a battle of perceptions, of who the judge would believe more. Undefined. That evening, Kody came back home visibly shaken. Undefined, for all his bluster, the cross-examination had shaken him. He repeated each question he had thought, each no that had escaped his lips. Each moment the attorney had pinned him down with facts he could not spin away. Undefined. He knew the next stage of the trial, the children's testimony, might either seal his fate or save it. Undefined. And as much as he despised admitting it, he dreaded what they would say. Because at the bottom of it, below the pride and the rage, Kody knew the truth he had been trying to run from all day. Love was not enough to cancel out the years he had spent away. Chomp. And in the eyes of the law, that truth could cost him everything. The fifth day of the custody trial was one of a kind. The legal briefs, the emotional testimony, the incendiary cross-examinations, all of that had been building to this. It was the day when the court was going to hear from the most important individuals in the entire case. The children, they were the center of this tempest, the catalyst for the reason Christine and Kody were embroiled in this bitter dispute. And now, for the very first time, their voices would be heard, raw, unrehearsed, and painfully candid. The judge had been adamant from the start that the children would not testify directly in court to spare them the emotional brutality of confronting their parents. Instead, their voices would be filtered through a court-appointed guardian ad litem, a representative who would speak on their behalf with their best interests in mind and their words, wishes, and fears. It was a common practice in contentious custody disputes, but one with great consequence. Judges gave great weight to what the children had to say, particularly when they were old enough to articulate themselves with clarity. And here, they were. When the guardian arrived in court that morning, the air seemed to be thicker than normal. Even Kody, who had spent a good part of the trial sporting a mask of confidence and control, seemed to be ill at ease. Christine sat motionless, hands tightly clasped in her lap, preparing herself for what was about to be said. She had no way of knowing precisely what her children had said to the advocate. All she could do was hope that what they had said was the truth they knew. As the advocate ascended into the witness stand, the courtroom was silent, so profound that even camera shutters ceased clicking. Everyone knew this was the testimony that could swing the balance. The champions started out describing their part, that they had interviewed each of the children individually, without one or other of the parents, and that they had intended to give the children's views without influence or bias. Then they pulled out a folder and started reading. The first quote was from one of the younger children, only 9 years old. Their testimony was plain, but it struck more forcefully than any courtroom argument yet. "I love my dad," the affidavit started, "but I don't know him anymore. He used to come to my games, but he doesn't anymore. He used to read me before I went to bed, but he doesn't anymore. I wish he would come see me more. I want him to stay for supper and not depart so early. I want him to care about what I care about." A whisper ran through the courtroom. Kody's face turned tight. Christine's eyes misted. It was the kind of raw, naive honesty that cut through all the excuses, all the defenses. The next utterance belonged to a teenager, mature enough to talk with greater depth and insight. "I do not dislike my dad," the teenager penned. "I just don't feel close to him. It's as if he is a stranger at times. He calls every so often, but we don't have anything to discuss. He doesn't know what is going on in my life. He doesn't ask. And when he is around, it seems like he's working too hard, like he's attempting to catch up on lost time all in one go. But too late for that. You can't just go missing and reappear as if nothing ever happened." Those words were like a punch to the gut. Kody's face went red as he glared down at the table in front of him. His attorney squirmed uncomfortably. It was evident that no amount of courtroom drama could take back the harm done by that level of emotional distance. Next was perhaps the saddest statement of all, from one of the middle children. "I don't want to live with Dad," it said. "I don't feel safe there. Not because he would hurt me, but because I don't feel like I belong. Everything is about Robin's kids. They have their routine, their tradition, their in-jokes. I'm a visitor in my own dad's home. I'm visiting, not staying there. I love him, but I want to remain where I feel like I'm home." Those 5 sentences weighed more than all of Christine's well-reasoned arguments combined. It was proof the children's connection to their father, once so strong, had broken down so much that his house no longer felt home. The advocate hesitated before reading the next statement, conceding that it included some difficult sentiments. It came from the oldest child remaining in the custody case. "I remember when Dad used to be my hero," the statement read. "I wanted to be like him. I trusted him. But that all changed when I saw I couldn't rely on him anymore. He didn't show up. He promised things and didn't follow through. And each time he broke a promise, it hurt a little bit less, until it no longer hurt at all. And now I don't know how to trust him again. I don't hate him. I just don't need him." The courtroom held its breath. The emotions behind the last line, "I just don't need him," seemed to linger in the air, unignorable. The advocate then presented their professional opinion that sole custody stay with Christine, while Kody be awarded structured visitation to work on building up trust over time. The children express love for their father, the advocate explained, but they also express deep feelings of distance, disappointment, and discomfort. It is my belief that forcing them into his full custody at this stage would be detrimental to their emotional well-being. The judge nodded thoughtfully, taking notes. Christine leaned back in her chair, tears streaming down her face, not from victory, but from the agony of hearing her children's pain exposed so publicly. Kody remained stiff, his face pale, and his eyes flicking back and forth between the floor and the bench. He had known the words of the children would hurt, but not like this. Not this much, honestly. When cross-examination was conducted, Kody's lawyer attempted to discredit the children's testimony, inferring that they could have been coached by Christine. Isn't it possible, he asked the advocate, that the children's own feelings are really just their mother's opinions? The advocate was adamant. I observed no evidence of manipulation or coaching, they said. Their testimony was consistent, specific, and highly personal. These are not planted ideas. These are lived feelings. The lawyer had another question, whether the children had shown a wish to live with their father. Some said they were willing to see him more, the advocate admitted. But none wanted primary custody with him at this point. For Kody, the testimony was heart-wrenching. All the reasons he had practiced, all the stories he had prepared about being forced out, they seemed meaningless now. The children's words were irrefutable evidence of what had ensued because of his absence. It was not Christine's testimony, nor the lawyer's allegations that had tainted him. It was the voices of those people he said he loved most. And no argument in law on earth could undo what they experienced. When the advocate stood down, the courtroom fell into an uncomfortable silence. No murmurs erupted from the gallery, no hum from reporters. It seemed that everyone was digesting what they'd just been told. Even the judge's usually impassive face had softened. The court thanks the guardian ad litem for their efforts, she announced. The children's views will receive the greatest consideration possible. Outside the courthouse, the effect of the children's testimony was felt immediately. News organizations used headlines such as "The Children Speak Out," "I Don't Know My Dad Anymore," and "Heartbreaking Statements Could Decide Custody Case." Social media was filled with messages supporting Christine and empathy for the children. Even some of Kody's staunchest supporters struggled to come to his defense after hearing how deeply his absence had impacted his children. That evening, Kody sat alone at his house, the force of their words resonating in his mind. I don't feel like I belong. You can't just leave and reappear. I just don't need him. He had reassured himself for years that he was doing the best he could, that the distance was not his doing, that he was unfairly represented. But today, for the first time, he was being made to face an painful reality. Love wouldn't be enough. Appearing in court mattered. Being present mattered. And all the persuasiveness he could muster there would not alter the truth that for too long he had simply not been present. Christine, however, experienced a bittersweet combination of regret and relief. It tore her apart to find out how much her children had been hurt, but she was also proud of their braveness. Proud that they had stood up for themselves. Proud that they had found their voices. That night, as she put them into bed, she vowed to herself that whatever decision the court was going to make, she was not going to give up on their happiness. And in the back of her mind, she secretly prayed that maybe, just maybe, their dad had finally listened. Because if healing the wounds that had been ripped open was ever going to happen, it would have to begin with him hearing the people who loved him most. The sixth day of the custody trial dawned over a cloud of subdued intensity. The trial testimony was over. The witnesses had all testified. The raw and unadulterated words of the children rang still in everyone's mind. And now it all came down to this closing arguments. This was the last shot either side had at persuading the judge, the last attempt to win him over before the gavel fell, and a ruling that would alter their lives forever was made. The courtroom was once again packed, but this time it was serious. It was as if all present had known that all the performance, theatrics, and emotional outbursts of the past couple of days were over, and no longer pertinent. What was important now were facts, persuasion, and what story each side could present about what best interests of the children meant. Christine sat quietly beside her attorney, clutching a small silver pendant one of her children had given her. It was a nervous habit she had developed throughout the trial, a small, comforting reminder of who she was fighting for. Kody, across the room, was uncharacteristically still. The fire and anger that had fueled his earlier testimony seemed to have dimmed. He looked drained, older, almost fragile. It was no longer arrogance or confidence carved on his face. It was desperation. He was aware of what was on the line. If he lost, it would not just be a legal loss. It would be a public admission that he had failed as a father. Christine's attorney stood up first for the closing remarks. He walked purposefully to the middle of the courtroom, stopping before he began. "Your Honor," he started, "this case isn't about who loves these children more. It's not about who is angrier, who was hurt more, or who has the louder voice. It's about stability. It's about trust. It's about consistency. And it's about who has been there, really been there for these kids when they needed it most." And then he systematically placed before the court the evidence that had been introduced the past few days, the ignored messages, the forgotten birthdays. He brought the court back to the sobbing testimony of Christine, not to present her as a victim, but to show the life she and the children had led. He went over the children's words again, underscoring their sense of remove, their need for dependability, their longing to stay where they were safe and known. "Love is not sufficient," he explained. "Availability is what counts. Being present is what counts." And over again, Christine has done so. Mr. Brown has not. He confronted Kody's charges of alienation head-on. "Christine did not alienate the children from their father," he said. "Time did, broken promises did. Neglected opportunities did. And it is not up to the children to mend those wounds. Nor is it up to the court to make them do something they don't want to do. It is Mr. Brown's duty, as a parent, to repair those bridges. But he needs to do it from a position that centers on their welfare, not his ego." The attorney summed up by requesting the court to continue Christine's sole custody, with Kody having structured visitation so that trust might be established incrementally, at a pace the kids could handle emotionally. "These children are not pawns in a power struggle," he stated. "They are human beings who deserve peace, consistency, and a future without unnecessary heartache." When it was Kody's lawyer's turn, he came to the microphone with a decidedly different tone of the first few days. The aggression and swagger were gone. In their place was an appeal to something deeper: forgiveness, redemption, and the abiding relationship between parent and child. "Your Honor," he started, "my client has been wrong." He would be the first to acknowledge that. But parenting is not perfection. It's love and it's work. And contrary to what has been presented in this courtroom, Kody Brown has never stopped loving his children. He has never stopped trying. He contended that Christine's story, as persuasive as it was missing something. Yes, there were missed calls. Yes, there were times when he wasn't present. But to say that those times define the whole of his relationship with his children isn't fair. People evolve. People mature. And people get second chances. The defense pressed home the point that the relationship between the children and their father could still be mended, but only if he were allowed to prove himself as a steady presence in their lives. To deny custody to Mr. Brown is to deny these children the opportunity to know their father completely, he stated. It is to make a thing permanent that should be transitory. The relationship between parent and child is sacred. It can twist, it can strain, but it must never be cut. He also contended that Christine's transition had created it challenging for Kody to keep a relationship, indicating logistical challenges had dominated over emotional abandonment. "We are not asking this court to obliterate the past," he said. "We are asking it to provide this family with a new chance at a different future." Then Kody himself got to make a short personal statement. His voice shook as he spoke to the court. "I know I've fallen short," he said. "I know I haven't always been the father I should have been. But I love my kids. I love them more than anything. And I want the chance to make things right. I don't want them to grow up believing their dad didn't care. Because I do, more than they will ever know." It was maybe the most exposed he'd been in the whole trial. Whether it was sincere remorse or a tactical ploy to move the judge was debatable, but the passion in his voice was beyond denial. Christine was also offered a chance to have her say. Her words were concise but compelling. "I don't want to take their father away from them," she said quietly. "I just want them to be safe. I want them to be happy. And I want them to know that no matter what is decided in this courtroom, they are loved. Deeply, fiercely, unconditionally." Her words were not about bitterness or blame. They were about the future of her children. And in a battle that had sometimes seemed like a war, her gentle earnestness shone like a lighthouse piercing through the mist. After both sides rested their cases, the judge thanked them for their professionalism and thoroughness. "This is one of the most emotionally complex cases I've presided over," she admitted. "There are no easy answers here." She then announced that she would take several days to review the evidence, testimonies, and recommendations before issuing her final ruling. And with that, the trial came to a close. At least for now. The waiting had started the moment they left the court, and it was ruthless. Christine went back home to her kids, attempting to keep things as normal as possible while in secret wondering what the judge would decide about their future. Kody withdrew into himself, pacing his living room for hours, replaying every detail of the trial over in his head. The media kept speculating, with lawyers arguing over what the judge would decide. Some felt Christine's case was airtight. The combination of her consistency, the children's testimony, and Kody's absent days created an unambiguous picture. Others sensed the judge would be inclined to split custody, stressing the significance of keeping a paternal relationship intact in spite of previous shortcomings. The kids sensed the tension, also. They didn't always grasp the legal technicalities, but they grasped enough to realize that their lives could be different. Some talked in hushed tones about what it would be like if they lived with their dad. Others admitted that they didn't want anything to change whatsoever. And throughout all of this, Christine kept them calmed by reminding them that regardless of what the judge decided, they would go through it as a family. Kody, on the other hand, was filled with regret. In the stillness of his home, secluded from the cameras and courtrooms, he acknowledged to himself what he had not been able to acknowledge publicly: that Christine had been right about so many things. He had put Robin's family first. He had lost out on too many times. And he had miscalculated how much that loss would hurt his children. He questioned whether it was too late to repair it. He wondered if they would ever view him the same as before. The days passed slowly, each one more oppressive than the previous one. And when the court finally made public the date for the verdict, the tension reached a boiling point. Their past, their troubled present, their unknown future, hung in the balance of what one judge's few words would say. A choice that would redefine their existence. And as the day drew near, both Kody and Christine couldn't help but ask the same question: what does it really mean to be a parent? Is it the individual who was present when it most counted, or the individual who's going to battle to be there today? The response, no matter which way it went, would soon be inscribed in the next chapter of their family's history. The last day of the custody trial came on the kind of tension that no one could possibly prepare for. The courthouse, once more packed to the brim, was strangely silent. Gone were the crowds shouting in the street, the vehement arguments between the fans, the hum of rumor from the press. Today, there was silence alone, the thick, expectant silence that falls just before a life-altering moment. Christine held her hands together in the courtroom, her knuckles white with tension. Her children's faces danced in her head, their smiles, tears, the words of the guardian's report. Each of these long, draining legal moments had been for them. On the other side of the aisle, Kody appeared wan and far away, his confidence shaken by the burden of the last weeks. He didn't resemble the fierce patriarch who once governed his family with unshakable command. He resembled a man holding his breath, waiting to know if he had already lost the dearest thing in his life. When the judge appeared in the courtroom, all eyes were on her. She had a big, heavy folder under one arm: the evidence, the testimonies, the recommendations, and the statements that would seal the fate of this case. As she sat down and fiddled with her glasses, the room contracted, the walls squeezing in on all of us there. This court, she started, her voice steady but assertive, has devoted a great deal of time to considering the evidence put before it in this case. I want to start by recognizing the intensely emotional nature of these proceedings. It is apparent to me that both sides love their children. It is also certain that errors have been committed, on both sides. My ruling today is not about punishing one parent and rewarding another. It is about one thing and one thing only: the best interests of the children. The judge started by recounting the essential facts of the case: Christine's steady availability and care, Kody's times away and accusations of alienation, the children's sincere statements regarding their relationships with each parent. She complimented Christine for giving a calm, stable environment when the family life had been disrupted, but she also recognized Kody's motivation to rebuild his relationship and his effort to battle for participation. Clearly, she declared, Mr. Brown has sometimes been absent in ways that have hurt his children, but it is clear too that he tries to make things right. Whether or not he will be able to do so is not this court's prophecy to make, but it is this court's responsibility to see that the children's immediate and long-term emotional interests are secured. The courtroom was silent as the judge opened the last page of her decision. Having considered all evidence before the court and the best interest of the children, she stated, "It is the ruling of this court that sole physical and legal custody of the minor children shall be with their mother, Christine Brown." Christine's hands went to her mouth as tears fell down her face. The relief was enormous. Sleepless weeks of nights, of uncertainty and fear, suddenly giving way to the realization that her children would stay in the house they knew, with the parent who had been their steady source of support and love. But the judge wasn't done. "Mr. Brown," she added, looking at Kody, "this ruling does not signify that you are not to have a role to play in your children's lives. You will be awarded visitation rights on a planned schedule, including alternating weekends, specified holidays and long summer periods. Further, the court very highly suggests family counseling to improve communication and to rebuild trust between you and your children." Kody took a deep breath and closed his eyes. It was not the win he had envisioned, but it wasn't a complete loss either. He still had a road, though a slim one, to repair the bridges he had let deteriorate. The judge made one last remark, one that would resonate long after the trial ended. "It is this court's sincere hope," she declared, "that both parents will make every effort to place their children's needs ahead of their own resentments. These children need and deserve both parents' love. And while the past cannot be erased, the future is yet to be written." With that, she brought down her gavel, and the case that had dominated their lives for months was finally at an end. The courtroom response was instantaneous, a combination of sobs, sighs, and shocked silence. Christine's lawyer put a comforting arm around her shoulder as she sobbed softly. Kody sat frozen for several long minutes, his hands clasped, his eyes unfocused. Robin leaned over and mouthed something in his direction, but he just didn't answer. The gravity of the judge's words, and the truth of what they implied, was still settling. Outside, journalists rushed to transmit the news, headlines already being penned in real time. Christine wins custody battle. Judge sides with mother in Brown family case. Kody granted limited visitation. Christine exited the courthouse with supporters and cameras in tow, her face still damp with tears but brightened with a soft, emotional smile. "This isn't a win for me," she said to the press. "It's a win for my children. They deserve peace. They deserve stability, and I'm grateful the court saw that." Her words were humble, but they carried the quiet strength of someone who had fought a long, painful battle and refused to give up. Kody emerged shortly after, avoiding most questions as he made his way to a waiting vehicle. But before he got in, he turned to the cameras and made a brief, trembling statement. "I love my kids," he explained, matter-of-factly, "and I'm going to do everything I can to earn their trust again." The world responded to the verdict in the subsequent days, with the same fervor that had enveloped the trial. Sister Wives fans took up social media with support for Christine, labeling her strength and resilience as inspiring. The others sympathized with Kody, praying he would seize the chance to learn and mend his broken relationships. The children, spared most of the media frenzy, quietly resumed their schedules, school, friends, ordinary life. But even they seemed brighter, glad to have some stability about their future. For Kody, though, the future was uphill. The counseling sessions ordered by the court were not voluntary. Trust building would be much more challenging than any litigation. The initial visits were uncomfortable, with long pauses of silence and tentative exchanges of words. The children, though courteous, remained emotionally distant, not knowing how much they could trust a man who had let them down so many times in the past. But Kody did not give up. Gradually he started to show up, actually show up. For games, recitals, and school functions. He memorized their schedules, inquired about their interests, and listened instead of talking. It was difficult, and it wasn't immediate, but it was a beginning. Christine observed it all happening with a complicated set of emotions. A part of her still burned with anger. Anger at the years she had spent raising the children by herself. At the nights she had held tearful children, who had no idea why their father wasn't present. But another part of her wanted, for their sakes, for Kody to be able to make it work. I don't want them to resent their father, she said to a close friend. I just want them to grow up knowing they were always worth showing up for. Months later, during one of their counseling sessions, one of the children spoke words Kody would never forget. I'm not ready to forgive you, they said softly, but I'm ready to try. It was a small step, but to Kody, it felt monumental. For the first time in years, there was a glimmer of hope. Hope that the damage wasn't permanent, that the story wasn't over, that redemption was still possible. The custody war that had once seemed like the end of it all had, in a very curious way, turned into the beginning of something new. It was the end of control for Kody, the end of silence for Christine, the end of a chapter marked by resentment and betrayal. It was also the beginning of healing, of rebuilding, of rewriting the story of a broken family. The decision hadn't altered their status as a matter of law, it had altered their lives. And as both parents started adjusting to this new reality, one fact was certain above all else. The struggle had never truly been about winning and losing. It had always been about love. Imperfect, complicated, messy love, and how far they were willing to go to preserve it.